people pleasers are easy to manipulate.
Right.
You give them attention and affection, and when you start to withdraw or take that away, then they're going to try even harder to please you or to get you back to where you were before when you were
Yeah.
manipulating them and giving them what they wanted. So, yeah, they're easy to take advantage of.
Yeah. Always wanted a family business, my brother working, kids, everybody together, but doesn't work like that sometimes. You don't always get what you want. So
Yeah.
we move on. Sometimes it ends up where you're trying to help people and you put yourself out there so far that you start struggling and then they start blaming you for that.
Yeah. When it comes to anxiety, is how can I mentally respin these things? So if we're thinking something negative, let's come up with two positive,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So awesome you came back down here for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We had a great conversation. I think that was like three, maybe episode three, and this is going to be episode 12 or 13.
Okay.
So we're moving right along. I wanted to have you back because the last time you were here, we got into a lot of kind of personal stuff. I mean, real deep, and probably owe you for a counseling service for
Mm.
that particular one. Because after that conversation, I sat and thought about a lot of those things we talked about, and you brought up some really valid points. And I consider myself kind of an intelligent person, and I may be mistaken because this podcast has shown me over the years. I've asked a lot of people different questions, and I've not really got an answer that that changes my mind about things. But in this podcast, there's been several people who's brought up points that I was like, I never thought about it like that. You were one of those. Brad Henson has been one. Just different perspectives that I've not ran into before. So that's one reason I like the podcast is it's I love talking to people, I like hearing about what's going on, and but now I'm actually learning. I told my kids, going into college, if I had an opportunity to just go sit and learn something all day long, sign me up. I've always been like that. I guess, I'm that documentary guy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm just getting old. Who is it? There's a comedian, pretty controversial comedian, but he talks about when you get into your white men, when they get in their 40s and 50s, they start turning Republican no matter what. They start watching History Channel and Shane. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So maybe that's it. I don't know. So anyhow, so what I wanted to do here was kind of get more information from you, like learn something today. One of the things that I have seen, and I want to go back to kind of what the process is for to get to where you're at, but also I'm really curious. So between the different classifications of mental health people that provide services. So you got psychologists, you got psychiatrists, you got counselors, you got all these different things in different levels. And I'm assuming those levels are there for a reason. I guess to one aids another. I don't know. And I'd like to get into that part of it a little bit. If you could kind of give me a breakdown of what a psychologist, what a psychiatrist is, what levels those are, how they work together,
Yeah.
and things like that.
Well, a psychiatrist is the one that prescribes medication. So they're the ones that, and then I provide therapy services. So therapy, we're processing trauma, depression, anxiety, we're working through mood disorders, things like that. And then whatever's not treated through processing and therapy, we get med management services. So we refer out to psychiatrists.
So, do the psychiatrists, of course, my understanding of this is based on a lot of movies. So, like The Sopranos.
Mm-hmm.
She was a psychiatrist, right? Are you familiar with that movie show? Okay.
Then watch it.
Yeah, so it was kind of a mafia guy boss, and he had some mental health problem. He kept having these panic attacks, and so he went to a psychiatrist
Mm-hmm.
and was talking it through. So he had to keep it hush hush because he didn't want to look weak,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And she said, he would just sit there and talk for a long period of
So they
time.
do. They do. Psychiatrists do sit there and talk to you. They're gauging family history, trauma, that kind of stuff. But it's not as in depth as therapy. Therapy, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. We're actually working in depth into the problems. We're actually processing deep trauma and struggles. Whereas psychiatrists, it's more surface level. just so they can know enough information to be able to provide you with that medication that you need for whatever your diagnosis is.
Okay, so then what would be a psychologist? Is that
Psychologist is more of the scientific realm of it,
okay?
of the studying of the brain and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay, so they're like
Yeah.
seeing what's going on in your brain, like
Mhm.
how what's firing where and what's lighting up at certain points, right? In a therapy session, I've only been other than the than the episode I had with you, I consider my last therapy session. But, the only other therapy session was years ago, and I tend to I tell the story, about that one, and I may have told it on our last podcast, but, the only therapy session I ever had was with some was it was a counselor, and I can remember telling my story kind of starting from the beginning and as I was going, and, I really got in I mean, really got into it. I'm like, "I'm giving it." And I look up and she's she's wiping her eyes. I'm like, "Damn, man, you made your therapist cry."
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. So, you said something about talk therapy. How what are some of the processes, and how do you gauge how to approach someone when they come to you and they're like, "I got a problem," and now
Mhm.
what's that next step?
Well, initially, when they first come see us, it's an intake session, which is where we are gathering information. We're asking the questions: what medications are you currently taking? What is your family psychiatric history? What is your psychiatric history? What are the things that you're struggling with? What's your presenting problem? Are you struggling with anxiety, depression? That's usually where we get our assessments as well. It's when we do our assessments like the GAD-7, PHQ-9. Those are the things that track depression and anxiety and things like that. Um, so yeah, mainly the first session is just kind of gathering that information. The next time it's a treatment plan, which is where we're just creating goals to kind of work on so we know what direction we're moving in. Mhm.
Okay. Um, so just so people know, the PH09, is that a
PHQ-9,
form or Q9? I'm
it's an
sorry.
assessment form. It's like a survey that asks a bunch of questions to gauge the rating or levels of depression and anxiety.
Right. And then the, GAD-7,
Mhm.
same
The
it's very similar?
PHQ-9 is the one for depression, the GAD-7 is the one for anxiety.
Okay, I'm catching on
Yeah.
now. What about, I know there's a test you take for ADHD.
Mhm.
Do you often use that, or is that something
Yeah,
you're familiar with?
we use those as well for kids. We use them you have to get one from a teacher or a parent, because 'cause you're also using observation from outside areas as well if you can.
Yeah, I noticed that on the ADHD test, there it's like a questionnaire. I guess this is for the adults. You know, you answer this question and they want you to have 2 other people close to you answer the
Mhm.
same questions
Yeah.
to get, I guess, to get a real understanding of what's going on there. So, when you see someone and you know, you've done this initial assessment, is do you is that at that point you're like, okay, this might be something where we're going to need some medications, or do you kind of veer away from that and try to focus more on the counseling as if it's possible?
It really depends on the severity of the client and their needs. Now, I do typically like to wait a few sessions and kind of see over time if they're still having a consistent problem. Is this just something that's happened recent and like,
Yeah.
you know, a life stressors happen and now we're having a little bit of depression, but this may not be something that's like long term. Um, but if they're coming in and they're very severe, then yeah, I would automatically refer them out to a psychiatrist. If it's something that we can wait on and kind of work in process, and then I still see that they're in need, then yeah, I would go ahead and send them later. It really just depends on the need. Every client's different though.
So in that situation, and again, I know it's hard to say per, but in some situations, you refer them out to the psychiatrist. Do they tend to come back then afterward for counseling once they've seen the psychiatrist, maybe
They
adjusted
maintain
some medication?
therapy. Yeah, they
Yeah.
maintain therapy, the entire time.
Yeah.
So they're not stopping therapy just to see a psychiatrist.
Okay. And
The psychiatrist will usually see them, give them medicine, tell them, "Hey, see if this works for 2 weeks, come see me in 2 weeks." They go back to the psychiatrist. If everything's good, then they may just go see the psychiatrist once a month, once every 3 months, but they would still come see me every week or every 2 weeks, depending on what their level of need is.
so during that time, are you, I guess you're having probably conferences with the psychiatrist or sending information back and forth, sharing that?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that you know everybody is on the same page.
Yeah.
Um, mm, so I do want to definitely make sure we get back to how you get where you are, and where what your plans are. Again, I don't know if we really got over that last time, but one thing I would say is so. And again, going back to my, can you turn that down, Tristan? Can you turn down my phone? Um, so going back to my movie experience, because that's all I can really draw from a lot of. Uh, so when you have someone and they're telling your story and you're like, okay, this is pretty severe and possibly um, could be harm to themselves or to someone else, do you then is I'm sure you're obligated to reach out. But then you have that patient. I know that's always seems to be a thing in the in the movies is, patient confidentiality and all that.
Hmm.
So how difficult is that to manage? Or have you had to manage any of that where you've seen someone where, okay, this could get out of hand and you might need to reach out to like some authorities or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we're mandated reporters, so if somebody's saying they're going to harm themselves or someone else, then we are obligated to notify the proper authorities. We can usually if it's telehealth, we would have to call the police, have them sent to their address. You have to confirm where the client is before you even start the session online. That way, if something does happen, you get disconnected, they are suicidal, you can send an ambulance and police out there to do a welfare check and that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, the same thing applies in office. If somebody reports something, then yeah, we're mandated to report that and get them help.
I'm guessing that's probably kind of a last ditch thing. You don't want, because I know that, coming to a therapist is hard enough, but then if you're worried that they're going to reach out, you
Hmm.
know, so I'm guessing that would have to be some kind of last, you're really concerned about their
Hmm.
health or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do what's called a safety plan as well. So if we see that someone's not completely there yet. They don't really necessarily have intent to act, or they don't have like access to a weapon or access to whatever, but they're still having suicidal thoughts or whatever. We do what's called a safety plan.
Yeah.
That is who is the people that your support you. Here are the emergency numbers to call, for help and support. What are our coping skills, that kind of thing. And that's supposed to be in place to kind of help prevent them from getting to that point where we'd have to go to crisis management. However, if we get past the point of safety planning and it's not working, then yes, we'd have to refer out to um, mental health services.
Okay. Um, my mind drifted a little bit there while you were talking because there's so many questions I want to ask, but okay, so we're going to jump around a little bit here because I got this on my mind and I don't want to lose it. So there's a lot of talk in about narcissists, um, am I tr-
Sociopaths.
sociopaths, psychopaths.
Hmm.
Can you help me with some of that understanding? I mean, it seems like everybody's boyfriend's a narcissist nowadays, you know.
Well,
Oh, and there's something else too. I'm gonna write this down because I want to go back to it because I did want to talk about it. Excuse me, just one second. Okay, now, so can you help me with that? What would be a clinical description of a narcissist? Just so I know if I am one, or maybe,
I can't give you that off the
or
top of my
maybe
head.
my wife might be.
No,
No,
I think the problem that you're seeing is social media, TikTok, all
yeah,
these
yeah,
things.
it's
Everybody thinks
confusing.
that every trait of a narcissist or a liar or, a manipulator, because I think that's a big, big aspect of narcissism is the manipulation, lack of empathy, and that kind of thing. That that means that someone is a narcissist, or we instantly label someone, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are.
Right. So yeah, yeah, I was looking into some things, and it says pretty much everyone has narcissistic traits. I
Well,
mean, because we're
we're human, and
yeah.
humans are naturally selfish.
Well, yeah, and I think that might be kind of a thing that kind of developed that we had to be. Some in some ways you can't, and in some ways, I find myself in situations where I put other people's needs in front of mine, and then you do that to a point where it's like, okay, now what is the old airplane thing where it says make sure you put the mask on yourself before you do something with someone else, and that's where I end up. And sometimes it ends up where you're trying to help people and you put yourself out there so far that you start struggling and then they start blaming you for that.
Yeah. I think the biggest trait to keep in mind is that usually people who struggle with narcissism, they lack empathy. They're not capable of being able to put themselves in anyone else's shoes. Even when they try to mask it. It's easily uncovered. Like you can tell that they don't really care. They don't.
Yeah. I've heard it said that narcissists just see other people as kind of tools to help for themselves,
Hmm.
to improve themselves. I tend to do a lot of self-evaluation because I care about the people that are in my life, and I care about what I do, and I constantly kind of maybe overcheck myself because I've got a lot of stress on me recently, and I take it out on the people who's closest, the ones that I really care about, the ones I shouldn't be taking it out on. As a matter of fact, my son Tristan over here, there was a day where everybody was giving me problems. It was just a hard day, and Tristan's here, and I'm looking around for Tristan. I'm like, "Where is Tristan? I need to yell at somebody," you know? And I hope that, and I hate that and that was in jest, joking around, but it's true. I do take it out on him because he's an easy target sometimes. I mean, he makes it easy for me, but I hate that about me. And then just recently, I've multiple times had issues where my wife is just being a wife. She's at home, she's doing mom things, she's helping, she's doing a lot of things, and then things fall behind on one side or another, and I just take it too far. And I'm not when I say too far, I mean I just get upset. I'm not,
Hmm.
and I don't want to be that guy, and I definitely don't want to be someone who's manipulating people. Is that and then, again, I may have to give you your 2-hour wage here, but, is that in itself kinda to tell you maybe you're not a narcissist, that you care, that you're
Hmm.
you
I
know, you're
was.
looking at yourself going, "I shouldn't do that because I'm hurting this person."
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to empathy. Uh, Usually people that don't have empathy, they don't really care how anything impacts you.
Mhm.
It's all about me, 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 and they don't have enough insight into their own behavior, and they're not really in tune with their emotions either. They're very detached and disconnected.
Yeah, so they don't even notice that they're being out of sorts. They're not
They
yeah,
don't usually notice, and when they do notice, they don't care.
yeah, and they probably have some way of justifying it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, let's talk about that. So you hear those words too, empathy and sympathy, a lot. More empathy, and I go back to my TV stuff where empath, on Star Trek. An empath is someone who can feel the emotions of others,
Hmm.
and I think that's kind of true because I can pick up, of course, body language gives you that right away.
Hmm.
Um, Tristan, when I say body language, go ahead and look up what's her name, the lady. Yeah, go ahead and have that up. I wanna yeah, we'll talk about her in a second, but, um, so can you kinda give me a different I mean, I understand, I believe I understand the difference between the 2, but there's maybe some people out there that don't understand the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Okay, empathy is your ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Sympathy is where you're like actually grieving with someone or like feeling what they feel.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
sympathy would be like, I'm not necessarily picking up on your emotions, but I know that I need to be there for
and
you.
I'm going to respect you and be there
Yeah.
for you in that moment. Whereas empathy is like, can I actually put myself in your shoes and think about it from your perspective and how it
Yeah.
impacts you?
Yeah, it's sorta like a phantom pain.
Hmm.
Um Do you find that people can be more of one and not? Like some people are, and now let's just exclude the narcissist because, of course, we kind of define that. Are there people out there that are much better at picking up on that empathy than others?
Mm, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of that empathic feeling of
Yeah.
yeah, and excuse me. Yeah, I see that a lot. I mean, in my life, I before and still to this, have done a lot of sales, and I can usually pick up on how people are feeling about
Yeah.
something and try to put them at ease. Excuse me. So, yeah, put them at ease. And in sales, it is kind of a mental health thing because you're trying to, say in like car sales. I did that when I was younger, and people would come in. They're going to buy a car today. Okay, if you're the first one they show up to, it's really hard because they're like, okay, today's Saturday, we're going out buying a car. and they start looking. So they don't want to buy the first thing they see, and if you're the
Mhm.
first one. So, it was real important that within just a few seconds that I, gained their trust and put them at ease so that
Mm.
they're like, well, we could go ahead and go watch a movie if we buy a car now, kind of thing. So I felt like I was able to do that pretty good. But there are people out there, I think, just blind to it. It's like I've had people that I'm talking to this person, and then the other person's talking to them, and I'm like, can't believe you just said that.
Yeah.
Obviously they're reacting negative. I have a friend who works for me here, and he's completely blind to how he comes across. I call him my resident asshole. I said I even introduce him to new employees. Okay, this isn't the asshole. You understand he's not doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see that as a plus or minus, as being overly empathetic, or is it the directness? I've tried to be more candid.
Mhm.
I follow a few people on social media, and they struggled with candor, and it gets them in trouble. Um, and you're doing it trying not to elevate a problem, or and in the long run, it seems like it causes more trouble. Do you see that a lot in people, that they're trying to people pleasing? Yeah,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
There's a thing in the therapy world called attachment styles. And one of them is an anxious attachment, which is someone that is a people pleaser. Um, and I do see that it's an issue because those people lack boundaries. They set them, but people don't follow them. They don't do anything about it. And I think that is a big issue.
It's been a really problem for me. I don't like confrontation, and it's weird because you'll watch some of my other podcasts. I used to train fighters, cage fighting, which is direct physical confrontation.
Hmm.
Never really been an issue. I was just yesterday joking to someone who works for me. I'm like, it would be so much easier if we could just physically fight and choose who's right and wrong. I would much prefer that than the other, because and feel like people take advantage of that. They can see it. I don't know if they sense it, or they unconsciously or not, but they're like they kind of prod you, because they are like, okay, he I'm trying to think of how I need to say this. So they're trying to get you to tell them what they want to hear. And I've been a lot better at this, because I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Because later then I have the consequences of that. Do you think that's a narcissistic trait? Maybe not people that are necessarily full on narcissists, but they see someone who's a people pleaser, and they take advantage of it.
Oh, absolutely. People pleasers are easy to manipulate.
Right.
You give them attention and affection, and when you start to withdraw or take that away, then they're going to try even harder to please you or to get you back to where you were before when you were
Yeah.
manipulating them and giving them what they wanted. So, yeah, they're easy to take advantage of.
Yeah, and also they're trying to avoid that confrontation, or that
Hmm. Conflict.
yeah, conflict,
Yeah.
and move on. I don't do really well with I think that I'm pretty good about improv, but I much prefer to be prepared for
Hmm.
someone to walk in a door. I have to kind of, and then by the end of the day, I'm so tired out.
Yeah.
I've said it often that mental stress is fatigues me more than anything, and
Hmm.
that's all I do nowadays. It seems like I don't really work on a physical level. Do you see that? And does that affect you on counseling? That because you're dealing, I guess you're kind of empathically taking on a lot of mental stress from your patients,
Hmm.
as well as your own mental stress just dealing with things. Is
Hmm.
that something you do? Does it wear you out by the end of the day? I think we touched on it a little bit last
Yeah,
time.
some days, yeah, but it's
Yeah,
one of those things that I think I mentioned last time. You have to know how to detach yourself, right, and leave it
yeah,
at the door. And I think I told you that what I do is when I get in the car, it's my reset. I'm putting
yeah,
on. Sometimes I have to drive home in silence, and just let my brain shut down and not have anything on my mind. There's some days where I need to pick me up, so I got to turn on a positive podcast or positive music to kind of mentally reset. But that car ride is where I have to, like, do that mental adjustment.
yeah. Um, do you find it hard? Like for me, I have to be careful when I'm doing a podcast, because I'm thinking of questions that I want to ask,
Mhm.
and so that's why I've been starting writing things down so I don't forget. Do you find it hard maybe when you're dealing with something in your own life, something stressful or difficult, or something you have to, confront, being distracted during your sessions, or you're able to just kind of shut that off?
Mm, I don't find myself distracted during. Typically because I feel like I do very good at compartmentalizing things. So, like, just, okay, this is my issue, putting it to the side. I'll come back to it later. So I don't necessarily feel like that's an issue for me specifically.
Yeah. Um, so going back to what we were talking just a little bit ago about some those traits where you can pick up on.
Hmm.
When you're in a session, you read like body language and kind of see what's going on there and think, okay, they're saying this, but I'm feeling this.
Hmm.
And is there kind of are you using kind of your sixth sense or your, you're relying on your kind of a gut feeling?
Definitely paying attention to body language. Are
Yeah.
they tense? Are they shut down? Are they withdrawn? Um are they lying? Are
Yeah.
they giving me just enough to kind of pacify so I don't question them, so I don't challenge them? Um, you
Yeah.
know, are they tired? Are they having sleep issues? Like there's a lot of other factors that kind of go into it as well.
Tristan, let's try this out. This is a new thing we're trying on the
Hmm.
podcast. We may have to edit it out. Can you pull Vanessa up there and then maybe play one of her videos, just a short clip, and see if we can hear it out here while while it's being recorded? So this is what's her name, Tristan? Vanessa. Jeez, and I this she owes me money because I advertise her for I
Hmm.
talk about it all the time, and I watched probably she's been on Theory of a CEO 2 times that I know of, and I watched both of them multiple times. Fascinating.
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe I'm a little weird about this, but I like to try I use these techniques, and there's another, person I watch a lot. We don't. We don't. I don't see her moving or anything. Okay. Yeah. So let's just play a little bit and see if we can hear anything, and then we'll go from there. If not, we'll just talk about it. Yeah, you may have to turn up the TV. Actually, I don't know. So as Tristan works on that, she just brings up little things, and we may have talked about it because I talk to everybody. Like I'll have a client in here talking about a car, and I'm like, hey, but I do use it a lot. I like to play around with that stuff, and I hope that's not a bad thing to try. Be talking about manipulating people. But she tells you so she talks about how when she was younger, she was extremely introverted. And to the point of when she was in college, there was like group things they needed to do together. And she'd try to talk the professor into letting her do it on her own.
Hmm.
And when she would do, and he's like, no, that's not the point. The point is, for you to do, do it on your own. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyways, there she is. So, I mean, at least we see her on there. And maybe we'll be able to add some of that in post, right, Tristan? But and she had a problem making friends, and so she started doing this research, and it goes back to some kind of instinctive thing that maybe we like. She would talk about when someone is startled, they retract and their eyes open, and that
Hmm.
kind of goes back to get away from what's startling you and open your eyes as wide so you can see everything there. And being able to pick up on some of those things can help you in your conversations, and also being aware of yourself. Uh,
Hmm.
and she would talk about stuff like it's not touching someone, but when you're talking to them, maybe leaning forward and reaching toward them to make them feel like you're sincere.
Hmm.
And eye contact. I'm talking a lot here, but I'm gonna let you kind of jump in. So, like with eye contact, everyone's eye contact, lots of eye contact. But and I've always believed that seems rehearsed when I'm just sitting here going, and now we're doing it, and now we're doing. Whereas in real life, if I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about what I'm saying. I'm not memorized something, so I'm thinking about it. And then when I get to my strong point is when I come to you,
Hmm.
just boom, and it makes it more impactful. Um, but a lot of that is just learning those things so you can pick up on those things really quickly. Is that something
Hmm.
you see in your conversations with people? You're like, okay, yeah, they're acting like they're telling me something, but there's something they're not. I can see it or feel it with
Oh,
their
absolutely.
yeah.
Sometimes if I'm doing a family or couple session, you pay attention to how they're sitting towards each other. When they're mad, they're turned away from each other. But usually when they're like talking positively or getting along, they're going to be facing each other. They may move a little closer to each other, away from each other. Another thing to note though is that while I am paying attention to body language and things like that, diagnosis matters, family history matters, and there's other things that I'm also keeping in the back of my mind when I'm paying attention. A lot of my clients do suffer or struggle with um, communication skills. So maybe what is appropriate, they may not know. Social skills, they may struggle with, you know. So maybe they don't know that they need to make eye contact, or maybe they don't know how to express. Like I have some clients that literally keep a straight face the entire time, but I know based on their diagnosis that that's their norm.
Mhm.
So they may not be hiding anything in particular. And I think that also goes with the more you see someone, the more you get to know them and know how they communicate, how their usual body tone and language is, you kind of know what's different and what's off.
Yeah. So you have a little bit of, I guess, because of these things they fill out.
Assessments, yeah.
Yeah, so you're using that in conjunction with how their body is,
Hmm.
and you're like, okay, yeah, they're being dismissive, but it obviously says here they don't like talk, or something
Yeah.
like that. You're
Yeah.
putting it together as a in more of a puzzle,
Hmm.
trying to figure this person out. So at some point, do you start giving people like things they can do other than talk, like, okay, I want you to go and sit in silence or I want you to go get some sunlight, or do you
Hmm.
have, those are some things that you can offer to them?
Yeah. So we come up with homework or plans all the time. There's some people that don't like homework, and that means they don't want to go outside and like do the work that I've given them.
Mhm.
They just want to process, and that's okay. But a lot of people do have to leave the session and work outside of the 1 hour that they see me a week and actually do things. So if they're struggling with depression, then the goal is going to be to get more active, get out in the community, find one friend to call today, see if you can have lunch with them. If they struggle with like overly attached to people, I can't think this morning.
Yeah, it's
I
all
can't
right.
find my words, but if they struggle with codependency, that's the word I was looking
Yeah,
for, then maybe you need to go have lunch or coffee by yourself,
yeah,
for 30 minutes. It may be uncomfortable, but we still got to practice and put ourselves in situations that make us uncomfortable sometimes. Um, I know I talked to someone last week about attachment styles. I sent them a bunch of information about attachment styles, some videos that they could watch. Sometimes I'll teach them different coping skills, meditation, things like that that they can practice outside to alleviate anxiety and things like that. So yeah, I'm constantly giving them homework and things to practice outside of the hour session because I'll be frank, an hour a week is not enough, right?
yeah, it's not.
It's a great opportunity to process your emotions and talk about the things that are going on, but you have to apply the things that you learn in that 1 hour in the real world. So that usually comes with
Yeah,
homework or a plan of things to do.
that is so true. I mean, an hour in podcast is like, we haven't talked about anything. We've been progressively getting longer, and now we hit in 2 minutes, 2 hours, and it's just still like we haven't talked yet.
Hmm.
We just kind of introduced ourselves. Um, yeah, sorry, I'm just making a quick note. So, what about diet? I mean, there seems to be a lot going on there with autism, and I know my diet can really affect my mood. Yeah, and maybe it's just my mind, but how do you feel about that?
So some of the things that I always ask at the initial intake, which I brought up earlier, is I want to know about diet, like what does your diet look like?
Oh,
I want to know about health issues. A lot of times we can collaborate with the PCP. What's your primary doctor seeing? Sometimes primary doctors will refer their clients to us if they see some things. Um, but also, you know, I just lost my train of thought. It was there and it's
we're
gone.
talking about diet and
Oh yeah,
yeah, how?
sleep. Sleep is a big factor in mental
Oh my
health.
gosh, yeah,
That's probably just as important as what you eat.
yeah,
A lot of people who suffer from depression and anxiety and these other things, they may not get 4 hours of sleep a night
yeah,
and then wonder why they're irritable, why
yeah,
they're struggling with anxiety. And so that's again where that psychiatrist comes in. Do we need to come up with a sleep plan? Do we need sleep medication? Like what else do we need to do? So there's a lot of factors, health, exercise, um, that plays a major role in mental health.
yeah. I know sleep for me
Hmm.
because there's days. The other day I worked 32 hours straight. So that was a hard, and then it really affects you, and it takes you a while to
Hmm.
recover. I didn't know. I remember listening to someone one time talk about sleep, and it's like he said something to that basically if you miss a night's sleep, you're not going to be able to the next night sleep more to catch up. It's more important about your schedule staying. And he said, if I have people over and I go to bed at 9, well at 8:30, I'm like, okay, guys, well, but I'm gonna have to, he starts, he does, he's so particular about that schedule, making sure that if you get 8 hours every night, you do it at the same time, which is
Mhm.
really hard for people nowadays.
Yeah.
Do you see people in swing shifts and stuff ever give you it? Yeah, that's just really a struggle for them.
Their health tends to decline,
Yeah,
their mental ability, their memory declines. That's a really big one. And then they start to freak out a little bit about it, like, oh, I can't remember, my memory's gone. But sleep is tied to everything. Your appetite, because if you're on a swing shift,
you're not
you're not
eating on a
eating on
schedule.
set
Yeah.
schedule and that kind of thing. So it's all tied together, everything.
I just recently experienced that actually last night. I'm trying to get I wanted to be fresh because we don't do a lot of morning podcast, and of course I do get to work at 7:30 or 8 anyways, but I just wanted to be rested and ready for you and not look like a catcher's mitt. But I struggled last night sleeping really bad, and I got up. Finally, I'll get up and I'll leave the bed because I don't want to disturb my wife that all night long, and I'll go downstairs, and then the next thing you know, I'm sitting in our spare room watching some stupid show, eating ramen noodles. I'm like, Jesus, dude. But then I look back and I'm like, I barely ate that day.
Yeah.
So with stress, with the busy life. Um, so let me see. I have a couple quick things. On that note, what about hypochondriacs? So for me, I have a really hard time with sympathy on sickness or pain.
Mm,
I've spent a lot of years training fighters, and I mean, one of our things in the fight game was, are you injured or are you hurt? Because if you're hurt, get up and get back to work. Get in there. If you're injured, we need to take a look at it. And our injury thing was what oh, you just got a broken hand. Well, that's fine. Your leg's not broke, so you're hurt. I mean, that's really honestly how we looked at it. And on that note, I want to give this shout out. I got Jonathan Ivy. And you don't know what I'm talking about, but some of these people do because we do what's called a pod fight, which is a bunch
oh,
of my
okay.
fighters come in and we talk about fighting, and it's been
Yeah.
popular. Jonathan Ivy is a humongous monster of a man, and I think he holds the record for the most professional fights ever. So I'm just shooting this out. He's coming, and we're very excited about it. He's the leg lock monster. He's created thug jitsu.
Mm,
Pull up Jonathan Tristan. Pull up some pictures. I want her to see who I'm talking about. This guy's awesome. He fought for me at one of my shows. I've never fought with him. Ivy, Jonathan Ivy. He's an MMA. Right? I never fought him, and I have a pretty good record. Never been knocked out. Never been tapped out. But I'm glad I hadn't fought Jonathan because he might have screwed my record up because this dude is a beast of a guy. But back to the podcast. Sorry, got a little distracted. I got that last night at like 11 o'clock, and maybe that's why I was up all night thinking. So going back to hypochondriacs, yeah, I have a really hard time with that sympathy thing.
hmm
I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. I don't even know how to approach someone who's, has that. Do you see that often, or do you get that same thing? Like people come in and they're like, yeah, this, okay, big, yeah, suck it up, buttercup,
Mm-mm.
kind of thing. How do you handle that?
Um, I mean, it goes back to being able to put yourself in other people's shoes.
Yeah,
Like at the end of the day, for me, it's like, oh, they're being dramatic. That's not that big of a deal, but to them, it's the biggest deal. It's the end of the world. This has their world turned upside down, and so my job is not to necessarily determine if they're real or not. Like their problems are
yeah,
real to me or not, because if it's real to them, it matters to them.
yeah,
So therefore, what's our solution? How are we going to solve this for them?
yeah. I guess that would be really hard. Another detachment quality, being able to go, yeah, that's not that big a deal. Why are you spending so much time thinking about it? Or maybe, you know, um, 'cause some people just think they have everything.
Well, and the human in me, there's days where I'm like,
Ugh,
no,
come
she goes
on. Yeah,
being dramatic. But yeah, the therapist in me has to take a step back and be like, to them, this is the most crazy
yeah,
experience to them. And also, we only see a blimp, right? When
yeah,
someone's telling us, oh, this is my problem, Yeah, that gives us a little bit of perspective, but we also might not have seen the 5 other things that happened before this happened. So now
Right.
that's magnified this for them, you know? And I think context matters as well.
So Tristan put Jonathan Ivy Leglock monster. Yeah, and you also put Clarksville. Um, okay, so going over that's kind of leads me to the next question I have. Over the years, I've known people, and I would say mostly women, who experience this problem. And a lot of these people are women who have a problem saying no. They don't, they're not, they're like, I guess, a people pleaser. Yeah, there's Jonathan up there. Look at that beautiful smile. What a, he's a monster of a guy. I don't see a good one of him. Like I said, he's thug jitsu. He's a tradition. No, that's not him. He's a traditional. He's trained traditional, but then he just went out on his own, man. And the guy is, yeah, you'd love him. You would love him. He's not. He portrays this character where he comes out with a, he few people in MMA do this. It's kind of a, there he is. That look at those beautiful tattoos there. Pull that up so I can see it better, Tristan. Just open it like with your finger. No, that's not him. Maybe.
I need that haircut.
What are you doing, buddy? All right, let's get away from that. Tristan's going crazy over here. Anyhow, yeah, Jonathan's great. I'm looking forward to that. So we'll just move on. So you go from the hypochondriac to so these people, and like I said, most of the time it's women, but not all the time. Sometimes, yeah, I've seen some guy friends have this issue with a partner who they're trying to break up with.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm thinking of a particular person right now who's dealt with this many times. They're not dealing with it anymore. They've finally moved on, but a partner, and they're trying to end a relationship, and they're like suicide. They say this suicide. I can't live without you. I'm just going to kill my. And I'm like, oh my god. But then you got to know when. I mean, I have very rare. I've known a few, two or three people in my life that has committed suicide. And it really hurt me because I didn't realize they were going to.
Mhm.
But the people who generally say, if you don't, they tend not to, is, how do you, how would you tell people, who's dealing with that in a relationship, someone's, threatening to kill themselves? How do you handle that? What would be a good approach to handling that?
Are you saying that from a manipulation standpoint, or you
Possibly,
yeah,
it always seems to end up being a they never do it, but then again, it could be the next time. But yeah, it tends to be if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself. Longer version of that, but yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
Well, that's manipulation.
yeah,
If you're telling someone, "If you break up with me, I'm gonna kill myself," that is a form of manipulation, but that doesn't mean that they don't mean it either. Um, I think the biggest thing here is that we shouldn't force ourselves to stay in a relationship with someone just because they make those kind of comments,
yeah,
right? Maybe we need to help them seek help. If you feel that way, that if I'm not here, that you are going to commit suicide, then we need to talk about getting more help. You may need a therapist. You need crisis management. Like we're going to have to do something different because I can't be your sole
yeah,
happiness, right? It's not fair to put that on someone.
yeah. And I mean, I've been in, relationships myself where I've never really considered anything like that, but I think finding yourself begging someone to stay with you, and then later you're gonna be like, it never in the moment, you're like, "Just don't leave." But
Hmm.
then you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, I had to beg this person to be with me?" Yeah, not so much. But let's say, in a situation where you're trying, maybe you've left, you're not together anymore, and you're getting these texts and these phone calls, and they won't leave you alone. "I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this." Should you, I guess, take that it's hard.
Take it serious.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You should every time someone says, "I'm gonna
Every
kill
time.
themselves,"
Every time.
and maybe then reach out to someone who can help you deal
Hmm.
with that. So,
Yeah.
okay, that's good advice 'cause I mean, honestly, I'm like, whatever,
Well, and
somebody would call me and say, "Hey, this is a situation I'm dealing with. I'm afraid that she's gonna do something to herself or he's gonna do something to himself." I'm like, "Man, my advice is, generally, my experience with that is it's just a manipulation tactic, but we should probably just take that serious,
you can
right?"
take it serious, call and get them help. You can send the police out to do a wellness check. They'll have them assessed if they deem that it's necessary,
Yeah,
but then you can still maintain that boundary.
yeah,
That doesn't mean that just because they've said that they're gonna kill themselves and you send a welfare check and get them help, that doesn't mean that you have to get back with them. That just means you did your job by getting them the help that they needed. You took it seriously and you can still maintain your boundary. And I think that's the biggest part of it, is still maintaining your boundary.
I know that in situations where that does happen, generally the person's like, "I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you called," you know. When and how does a person just shut it down though? I mean, there's people that just will they have something in them where they're like, if I push this hard enough, I know this person will say, okay. How do you shut that? You just all contact, shut it off.
If you break up with someone and they threaten and say, I'm going to commit suicide,
Right.
take that seriously. Call the police. Let them do a wellness check. Let them get the your ex an assessment and some mental help. And then you block them,
Right.
right? Because you've done your
Done.
job. You broke up with them, but you still took the initiative to make sure that they were safe. And as
Mhm.
long as they're safe, you're done. You
Yeah.
establish your boundary and leave it alone, right?
Right.
And if you block them, then that's no longer your problem. Hopefully, whoever assessed them would make sure that they got the proper help that they needed.
Yeah.
But
It's some
going back and forth, you're just keeping yourself and them in a vicious cycle.
yeah, I think in that situation a lot of times people get in a like too close to see kind of you know,
Mhm.
those people who you know someone who just got broke up and you know they can't like I can't live without this person. It's like they're so close. They can't see what's really going on until later. You can step back and like, "Oh man,
Yeah.
how did I get hooked in that cycle?" You know.
Well, and it's that emotional tie
Yeah.
too, right?
Right.
When you just break up with somebody, you're still emotionally connected. You haven't fully probably detached most of the time, and so you still care about them. You
Yeah.
still want to know that they're safe and that they're okay. And when we care about someone, what do we typically do?
Yeah, we try to be there for them, yeah.
Right.
Right, right. But that's in that situation is the most probably the worst thing you can do because 'cause you're just continuing to give them it goes back to this Jim Carrey movie, Dumb and Dumber. I don't know if you remember that, and he had
I do.
the woman, he was, you know, like and, he's like, "Is there any chance that we could ever be together?" You know, and he's like, "1 in a 100?" And she's like, "No, more like 1 in a million." And she's like, "So you're saying I got a chance?" You know, that's
Yeah.
it. Every time you come back, they're like they don't see it as you caring for them and wanting them to be okay. They see it as, "Oh, I got an opportunity maybe to get back with
Mhm.
this person." I guess, do you deal with a lot of that, relationship problems and marriage problems and things like that?
Mhm.
It seems to be in marriages that marriage counseling is like allowing yourself, you almost like you've been defeated. It's like we shouldn't have to do marriage counseling. We, you know,
I don't typically do marriage counseling. I usually work more one-on-one. I do some family sessions specifically for foster kids and like their families. Um, every now and then I'll do some like sibling sessions when I have behaviors in kids where they're kind of being aggressive with each other and that kind of thing. Um, but they have licensed family marriage therapists specifically that work with married couples. Um, and I don't do a lot of that.
yeah,
I've had a few boyfriend girlfriend situations, but nothing long term.
yeah. What about abusive relationships? Do you deal with that a lot? Women coming in and possibly even men
Hmm.
coming in with that?
Absolutely.
And I guess there has to be almost kind of a syndrome there, something clinically that people like a woman who allows that to continue to happen.
I get a lot of referrals from the court system. So kids that are have a CDW worker or, adults who have been referred by the courts for services.
Yeah,
Domestic violence, intermittent explosive disorder, destroying property, that kind of stuff.
right. What about the women who continue to go back to that? Is that often the case until it just gets to a point something happens? Is that something inside them? Is that a people pleaser? Is that an abandonment issue? I don't know.
Oh, all of the
All of
things,
the
all the
above?
things. There's
Yeah,
many reasons people go back, you
yeah,
know. Some are financial reasons. Some are
yeah,
they grew up in homes that were broken or they felt abandoned and now they feel bad if they separate their kids, even though they know it's unhealthy or toxic.
yeah.
Some of it's they genuinely do love the person. They see the potential in that person, even though they're hurting them.
I
There's all
can
kinds of reason people
I
stay.
can fix them. Yeah. Um, In those situations, though, when people are dealing with that, do you see that happen on the men's side? I mean, there's this sometimes a man, especially generational, don't hit a woman, don't do this, and you got someone who is just basically physically and verbally abusing you. You got to stand there and take it.
And that's one of the most frustrating things as a therapist is you have the same client that'll come in week after week. And a lot of times you'll ask like, "Hey, any update on your situation?" And they're still with the same person that's been hurting them this whole time. The thing is they have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired, right?
Yeah.
My job is not to force them to do something when they're not ready, because then they start to resent me. Oh, you're the reason I left them, right? I have to make it seem like it's their idea. I have to give them the tools. A lot of it's lack of confidence. Let's build their confidence so they feel confident enough to walk away, or build their self worth so they know that they are worthy enough and deserve better, right? Um, Identifying who their supports are. What are your coping skills? So when you do leave and your anxiety's high because it's a different and new environment and change, how can I deal with that? How can I process that and cope with that in a healthy way? So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be kind of an odd question, but to me, and I've heard this say before, humor is a healer. Do you ever use humor in a situation that maybe to lighten the mood a little
Oh,
bit?
absolutely. And that's the best part about what I do is that I really get to know the client and what they like, what they don't like. Um, and we have jokes. We have, we have, understanding. I know, their favorite music, their favorite foods, their favorite movies. I know what makes them tick. I know what makes them happy. These are the people that are coming in and telling me their deepest, darkest secrets. But they're also telling me the joys. Like this is what happened that was good this week, and it gives me something to build off of. So yeah, we tell jokes, we laugh.
I know for me, talking is much easier to joke about a problem, a serious situation that I have, and we even got into that a little bit last time. But I will somehow that makes it feel keep it a little more lighthearted and
Mhm.
easier to talk about. So, and I know that laughing, one of my most, I know, I would say probably my most favorite thing in the world is to hear someone genuinely laugh that I care very much for.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's probably a guy thing because they, you know, there's a thing around, I keep hearing, women like a man to be funny, and a man loves it when a woman laughs at his jokes, you
Mm.
know? So that works good together. But for me, I really, yeah, to hear my wife genuinely laugh, or any of my kids, it's just I don't know what it is, and especially when I'm the one that caused it. I've said something that I wasn't even expecting a response from, and then the next thing you know, I get this huge laugh, and I love that. That's one of my favorite things, and I enjoy that. I think that's healing in some ways. That when you get in that, I don't know, something that does. Maybe it's some kind of serotonin. I don't even know, some chemical release when you're laughing.
Mhm.
So yeah, excuse me. Okay, so let's jump back. Let me re-grab my thoughts again. So the process that you went through to get to where you are now, and then maybe a little bit about where we're going. And then Tristan is going to. We've been trying to take like a break during an hour because we had some major issues. So we'll take that. We'll after we do this, maybe take a short break. We'll grab one of those donuts, and then we'll come back.
Alrighty,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Okay, good. So give me kind of an idea how you got to where you were. I knew we talked a little bit about why you wanted to last time, but
Mhm.
then what's that process?
I started out at the community college. I was doing the 2-year program, transferred to Western Kentucky University, got my bachelor's in psychology. And then I took 2 years off. I got married, family life. And then I decided I wanted to go back for my master's, but because I was an adult with a family and married, I went part time. So I did a part time 3-year program to get my master's degree. And I got my master's in social work.
In social work.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can go different routes. There's LPCAs, which is they're certified counselors. Um, and then I went to the social work route. Um, we
So
we all practice in therapy and
okay.
the mental health
So
world.
so you can be a certified therapist, or through social work, you can apply therapy there.
Hmm.
Right. What's the next step?
If I wanted to go beyond what
Mhm.
I have now, then I could get a doctorate.
Okay,
Hmm.
a doctorate. and then
Mhm.
keep going.
You can get a doctorate, but you don't need it to practice,
So
so it's
yeah,
not really beneficial for what I wanna do. Typically, I would get a doctorate if I wanted to, like, be a professor or if I wanted to do research, something like that.
okay. And is there like ongoing learning? Because I
Yes.
mean, things change, new
Mhm.
new ideas come around.
Yeah.
So you have like,
We have yearly, trainings we have to do, ethics and that kinda stuff, but then you also have other trainings and stuff, especially for specialties. So if you wanna specifically work with, let's just say CBT or EMDR, which is more of that trauma focused therapy, is what EMDR is. If you want to work specifically with that, um, maybe you want to specifically work with clients that have autism. You maybe want to specialize in child therapy, do play therapy and stuff like that. So there's different trainings based on what you specifically want to do and the population you want to work with.
so after you gather all this, I mean, I use these things that I watch on
Hmm.
TikTok and these people that I watch. So you use it in your own personal life, like how you deal with your children or how you deal with a person you're negotiating with.
Hmm.
I mean,
Absolutely. But I'm human too,
yeah,
right? So
right.
there's times where my kids are being obnoxious, they're yelling, they're screaming, they're just being kids. And everything that I know and everything that I've learned flies out the window,
Yeah,
right?
it's like boom.
Right.
Yeah,
And then there's other times where I'm like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to do this, right?
yeah,
And so it comes and goes.
yeah. Do they pick up on it? Like your oldest son, his name again is
Elvira.
oh yeah. Does he like okay, you're being a therapist mom now. This is you're not gonna get me on this.
He was almost grown by the time I finished my master's, so
So yeah,
he didn't have to deal with a lot of that. But like my 5-year-old, like now she's kind of wild and stuff, and she's got a lot of big emotions. So we've been really practicing on our deep breathing and stuff like that at
yeah,
5, so she can learn to regulate her emotions. So I mean, that's just an example of me like applying some of the stuff I do at work at home.
yeah.
But now she does her deep breathing and she goes,
Okay, now mom,
yeah,
I want to watch this cartoon.
yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's something we didn't do a lot and do any of in my generation as a young person. There was no learning to regulate emotions or, you know, it's just, yeah, there wasn't no understanding of how that worked. So
yeah.
it makes it a little difficult, when you get older because the new generations have these things, maybe a little bit more at their fingertips that they
Mhm.
can, and then I'm that person who reacts a certain way, and then I get that feedback of why are you always like that? Why are you this?
Yeah,
Well, it's because that's just, and then I'm like, isn't that just the way it is? That's just the way we are, but
yeah.
it's not. So, okay, I don't remember exactly the last thing we were talking about, but I was taking some notes. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So going back to Mike, are we recording, Tristan? Are we on? Making sure. Okay. I wanted to going back to my movie experience. Okay, let's talk about Sopranos. You might like that show, actually. I think you would because there's a once it really gets into that therapist thing. But so during the movie, and not to do whatever that's called when exposing too much, but at some point, he Tony Soprano, the guy going being therapist, starts to have feelings for his therapist. And then that progresses, and she's like, the movie's like, oh no, and she's actually seeing a therapist, and then she's like, he's telling her, you need to get away from this because you're starting to have the same things. Whereas he's married, he's a mafia boss. It
Mhm.
gets crazy. You have that issue that patient attachment, and you have to deal with sometimes. I mean, you're a very pretty lady. You're very,
Mhm.
and then when you're sitting there talking, and this is something that I've noticed too, and I try to tell my wife, and sometimes guys are weird, man. You can just say, "Oh, excuse me, sir," and they're like, "Ah, she's into me, man. Oh,
Mhm.
here we go." Do you have that issue any at all?
I think I set boundaries pretty well and redirect pretty well, if I feel like something's crossing a boundary or line. I know recently I had a male client try to add me on social media and, I just addressed it like, hey, I can't add you on social media. And they instantly were like, "I'm sorry." And I'm like, "It's nothing personal, just professionally, I cannot, and
Yeah.
I don't add clients, you know?" And there was really nothing else said about it, and just one of those things that I had to address.
Going back to that candor, being
Mhm.
candid about it. Let's talk about it right now.
Yeah.
This is what's going on, and we can't do this. Nothing against you. You didn't know that. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's has to be the way to go because just anything like that can get so far out of hand so quickly.
Mhm.
Um, when you have you, I guess when dealing in that situation there, does it then cause issues the next session you have with them, or is like they get
No.
through it pretty quick and it's like, oh, okay,
I mean, I think it's one of those things that if you've established good rapport with the client and they trust you and they know that your intentions aren't spiteful or manipulative or mean or ill intent, like this is my job. My job is to be professional. This is a boundary. This is why I can't be your friend on social media. You know, if they have questions, I'll answer them. But I mean, in that situation, he was really cool. He was like, I understand. I
yeah,
wouldn't, he was like, I knew that, but I wasn't thinking when I did it. Okay, that's fine.
yeah,
You know?
right. I get. Have you ever had a situation? I think in one of these things I was looking at one time, that was similar,
Hmm.
and then he says, "Well, I'll just get a new therapist so we can be friends." You know, has that ever been in some kind of an approach? It's like, okay, well, I'd rather be your girl, your boyfriend than your patient.
Well, there's
And let's just say, not just in your experience, but I'm sure you talk to others.
ethically, we're not allowed to date clients at all. I believe it's 5 years.
Oh,
You
really? Yeah.
after it has to at
Well,
least
that
be
makes it
5 years.
easy.
It's highly recommended that you don't date a client
Right.
at all. So I haven't had that situation in particular happen, but I mean, I also know that it's a big no-no.
Yeah. Well, but the patient may not know that, and they're like,
Mhm.
"Well, here's a quick fix." You
Yeah.
know?
And I would just have to make them aware, like, "Hey, this is our requirement
Yeah.
professionally. I can't do that. This crosses a boundary." And you can see it happen a lot where the client will become attached or like their therapist because that is the person that they get to be vulnerable with, right?
Yeah.
The person who is actually listening and maybe giving them the most attention they've ever had. And sometimes when we get in our feelings, then
Yeah.
emotions fly and, feelings get caught and whatnot. So, I mean, it happens.
I think my best example would be going back to movies would be, Step Brothers, if you remember that one. Do you ever see that movie? Oh my gosh, how am I going to do references when you we get
Not your
we
girl.
got you
Can't
gotta watch that. Well,
can't
you need
help
to
you.
watch that one because it's Will Ferrell. My wife hates Will Ferrell movies, but it's hilarious, and they're 40-year-old men who still live at home, and, and then, he starts seeing a therapist, and he falls for it like crazy, way over the top comedy
Hmm.
kinda thing, so, in sessions, I watched this show one time, and it was like things that happened in the ER. They were just some
Hmm.
of them were real, some of them were remade, but there's some crazy stuff out there.
Hmm.
I remember seeing a lady came in off the street, and they were trying to assess her. She was filthy and definitely dealing with some mental health issues. And I'm not trying to gross you out because, well, I won't, will
I
I?
don't have a weak stomach.
Okay.
You're good.
So they're going, they're assessing her and they're touching her head, and then they find out this mat of hair
Mhm.
is just more like a cap, and her entire scalp had been, they lifted it off like a cap. It was just being hanging
Wow.
on this side. You could see her skull, and she's been living like that. Crazy stuff like that happened. There's one that gets, yeah, well, it did crazy things. Can you ever been just sitting there going, yes, 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 what?
Mm.
Maybe not physically, but go, wow. Have you had things like that happen?
Absolutely. The stuff
Yeah.
I hear every day. There's days where I go home and I'm like, people are crazy. The world is weird. And most people just walk around and don't even notice it.
Yeah. Well, because they're going to tell you, they might
Hmm.
not come tell to their dad or their mom or their best friend about some craziness, but they'll
I
be like,
get to
hey, this is where I can get it out.
listen, I get to hear about people's fraud. I get to hear about people cheating on people. I get to hear about people beating each other up. Like every day
Yeah.
is something new, and never boring for
Yeah, I can
sure.
imagine some crazy stories. So that's an interesting one I've never heard of. So someone comes to you and it's like, all right, listen, here's where I'm having some issues and I don't know what to do. I'm cheating on my wife. I'm cheating on my girlfriend.
Hmm.
How do you how do you go about that? Do you actually give advice and say, well, first thing you need to do is this, and then you, or do you just listen?
A lot of times I have to listen
Mhm.
because one, I need context to understand their headspace. Why are we feeling like we need to do this? And then I want to know what their boundary or what their morals are, right? Because to some people who grew up maybe seeing mom and dad cheat on each other, right? It may be normalized. But to someone else who is very religious or cheating is really wrong and then they're still doing it,
They're beating themselves up.
they're beating themselves up. So not only am I listening, but I'm also wanting to gauge what is their moral compass? Is this something that they genuinely feel bad about? Is this something that they want to change? Not everybody wants to change. There's some people is like, I know I'm cheating. I can't stop cheating. I don't
Mhm.
want to stop cheating. I want my cake and eat it too. Right. There's some people who are cheating who feel guilty about cheating and they don't know how to get out of a situation that they're in. And at that point, if they're willing and they want my help, then I will offer advice. But
On how to make this change.
I mean, as a therapist, we have to be really careful about not just giving advice, right?
Yeah.
Um, because sometimes it turns into us giving our own opinion, and that's not what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see that, and then also there may be some things that haven't been told,
Mhm.
and when you say, "Yeah, well, this is what you need to do," but you didn't know about this other situation that maybe
Mhm.
wasn't brought up. Um, so there's often, I mean, and you see that you hear about this quite often, men and a man and a wife that's been married for a long time and they've grown older together,
Mhm.
that there is a cheating situation that is underlyingly known by both. That can't be healthy, in my opinion. The wife knows it's going on. She's like, "Keep it quiet. You can do whatever." And the man, that can't be a healthy situation. But I guess you get yourself in such a bind. So you say you've been married for 30 years, 35 years, and you're dealing with a situation where the husband is seeing someone
But who gets
else.
to determine what's healthy or not, right? If
Right.
that couple is okay with that dynamic, who are we to say? To
And
us on the
yeah,
outside, it's like, okay, that's inappropriate. Why are you not handling this? But to her, you know what? Maybe I can't fulfill his sexual needs because I have health issues or I have depression and I'm giving him permission as long as he isn't out here telling everybody and
yeah.
he's not out here spreading diseases, I might allow this, right? We don't know context into other people's lives and what they're okay with. And I think that's a big factor.
Okay, in that situation, then I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped around it because you do have a lot of personal moral issues or things you've heard, grown up with, and life isn't a cookie cutter situation. Not everything fits, and I say that a lot on my podcast because people will judge others. You know, Phil Robertson passed away recently.
Hmm.
Tristan, you can pull a picture of him up, I'm sure.
I know who
Phil
that is.
Robertson. Phil Robertson. He's with the Duck Dynasty crew. He's the dad, and he's a very Christian man. He's got some nice things to say.
Hmm.
One of the things he says is through Christianity, and he's been able to, this is something where people can find that when you're alone, you're not really alone.
Hmm.
So you can definitely find some great things the man said, but also he puts it out there that you live like me, you'll be good, you'll
Hmm.
be happy,
Hmm.
and that's not the situation. I mean, there's no cookie cutter out there. I
Hmm.
don't believe it. And you can't really judge people based on just things like that. So yeah, there's old Phil. He passed away a few days ago. Like I said, he had some really great things to say, and I think for the most part, definitely meant well, and probably for the most part did more good than anything. But again, not everyone wants to be a Ballard County duck hunter. There's
Hmm.
these guys that they have different ideas. I see that a lot in cars. I see that a lot in music. I see that a lot in modern entertainment. Back before, even me, I'm that guy. I try not to be judgmental. I try not to be a hypocrite, but my hypocrisy runs deep. Guy came from a movie, by the way. But I love movies, as you probably can tell.
Hmm.
Well, when I first started with my wife, one of your real good friends, we watch movies all the time. And the great thing about being with someone so much younger than with someone so much younger, is the movies that I love are new to them.
Yeah.
They have. I'm like, oh, this is great. She was telling a story one time. I'm going to get off point here. Before I met her, she's an old soul. She likes stuff like, and she's talking to her dad about wanting to hurry up and get home and seeing the next episode, the new episode of Bonanza. And he says, That's not new. That episode was filmed before you were born." And she said, "It is new to me," you know?
Yeah.
So that's a fun thing. Now I've gotten myself off point here. Um, we were talking about crazy things that happened, and then we got off on, the experience between okay. So back to where we were. Now I just got off on all that saying we shouldn't be judgmental necessarily in the situation, but you have a situation, man, wife, together for a long time, and then, at some point they both not even a verbal agreement, but they both understand this is the situation. And then I was asking you, is that a healthy environment? And you're like, well, it depends on the environment, and it depends on the causes and the reasons and things like that. Um, when you maybe are dealing with something like that, would you try to, just because there might be a little bit of a red flag there, throw up a flare or maybe start asking some questions to verify, there's not some resentment here, even though, some jealousies that may not be said, or someone who is like, okay, just do it, but I'm okay with it. Do you ever,
Oh,
yeah, you kind
absolutely.
of deep dive it a little bit?
Yeah, because, like you said, like, is there resentment? Are we just saying it because we're a people pleaser and they'll stay as long as I tolerate this, but secretly it's the reason I'm depressed and I can't get out of bed and I don't want to eat, right? So when I say context, like that's the context I need. Like,
You need that
hmm
information to start really kind of seeing what's going on here before, yeah. Um, then you get into some other situation. I guess I don't know why I'm on relationships so much, but I think that's a big part of most people's lives. You get into situations where you have, so I know this one particular couple, and they have her husband has a daughter, and they share that time, and but so the woman he was with before now has multiple people as girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, boy, and it's all together. Now, I may have added one or two too many girlfriend boyfriends there, but there's multiple partners with one person in a relationship. Does that throw up flags for you?
like a
Like like jelly? Yeah, yeah. Like,
polyamorous relationship.
say you have a woman and she has two boyfriends, or a
Oh, I've had client.
man that
Yeah,
has like three girlfriends
I've had a
and a
client.
boyfriend.
Yeah, I had a married client who got married and then basically decided they wanted to be polyamorous.
Yeah,
And without giving too much information, definitely did some deep diving into what are our attachment styles? Are we codependent? How were we raised? What are our religious views? What are our moral views? Like there was a lot of factors that played into gauging, is this healthy for you? Is this impacting your mental health? Is this causing your major depression and that kind of thing?
yeah. So there used to be several shows on TV, where that has happened, but then recently there's been a new one. I haven't watched it, but I've seen it being advertised. Um, there's so many different variations in the world nowadays of how what family is. And I guess, you got to think about this. I was talking about this with a friend of mine, he old school Xer, and he's like, everything that anybody who's not Generation X is the wrong way to do it. I'm like, what are you basing that on? Are you basing it on, a Camaro?
Yeah.
There'd be, 50, 100 years, 200 years before, there was no such thing. So what's really right? How can we really identify that? It does, though, really, I guess this really gets into the root of our moral background of how can that be okay?
Mhm.
And how can there not be some jealousies there? And the children being raised, are they going to, what is that? There's just so many issues like that that this just doesn't feel, I guess there again, you're going to your feelings and you have to rely on your training, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, then there's also, I mean, nowadays you deal with a lot of gender issues, like, and I'm not trying to get anything real controversial here. I don't judge my personal necessarily. There's some things that I think are
Mhm.
one way or the other. But do you deal with that a lot in your area? A lot of gender issues, gender dysphoria. Is that a real thing, or and you may not be able to answer that, but at least give your opinions. And people may be dealing with these issues that are getting judged for the depressions that they have. Just give me a little bit of information on that.
So yeah, I have been seeing gender dysphoria and, you know, relationship identity issues, you know, but I think the biggest factor is really kids because that's a whole new world. Like
Yeah, that's a tough
kids
spot.
navigating their sexuality, and trying to understand their bodies, but then also having parents who may not approve or may not agree or may not know how to help them, right?
Well, and I want to interject really quick, and I want you to continue. There's some that seems to push that direction,
Hmm.
like because it's a popular
It's
thing.
becoming popular,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we see it in celebrities a lot.
Hmm.
So, but so you deal with that a lot. What are some of the problems that you have to deal with there?
I think right now the biggest problem is parents. Parents not understanding their kids or how to help them or what that looks like. Because parenting's hard enough on its own, and then add sexuality and gender into that, and it's kind of uncharted territory.
Yeah,
So,
for me, growing up, you know, people who were gay. That was an issue, especially in this area. I personally worked for someone who was gay, and this was in a point where it was not a popular thing. So I seen a lot of things that they went through, and I guess it's you have to put yourself in the context too. For me, still to this day, I don't care, and and I don't mean that in a dismissive way. I mean it just doesn't. It's not something. It doesn't. It's not an issue at all. And then now, even now, though, you're seeing a lot of people who are gay, especially the older generations, who are judging the transgenders. Do
hmm.
you have issues? See that a lot? And before you say anything, the reason I see this a lot is they're saying these people or children aren't transgender; they're just gay, and they're not being given an opportunity. Yeah, and then you get into a whole thing, is there gay? For me, I mean, I'm sorry I want you to talk about this some, but, like, I have a lot of people in my life that are gay people, and I don't even think about it anymore, but when I look at what their relationships and I look at who they are and what I'm like, "Yeah, they gotta be gay." There's
Yeah.
no way that that's not that they're just faking it or they're whatever to do what not to get too crude, but to be in the relationship they're in, they got to want that. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? See, where are we at on that? Is that more and more? Are people being judgmental? Is it strong? Or are some of these kids just confused? And I know you can't answer all
I
that,
don't.
but give me some idea of
I
what's
have a
going
few
on.
clients that are just have gender dysphoria and deal with sexuality, but I don't really have any clients that are transgender. I feel like we talk about transgender, um, and we kind of clump the people who want to be transgender with the people that have actually transitioned. And I think there's a little bit of a difference. Um, Actually, there's a lot of difference. It's one thing to, wanted to transition. It's another thing completely to have completely done it. Um, because that comes with mental health issues. It comes with other things. Um, but I don't necessarily work with that population, so I don't want to speak about it too much.
Right.
But
Do you have you seen it? And we talked about you had some continuing education.
mhm.
Has that come up in that continuing education? These are things that you might want to keep an eye out for. And
Oh yeah. But I think for me particularly, that would be something that I would just refer to someone else, right? That's not really a specialty that I would want to dive into. It's very complex. And if I got someone that came in with those issues, I would refer them to someone specifically who specializes in that. And there's not a lot of people that specialize in it right now.
no, here in this area, I know of one doctor who deals with the physical parts of it a lot, and
Hmm.
he does those. And he actually is a doc. When I talked to him, he actually didn't really agree with what they did, but he says, I still treat them and I want
Mhm.
them to be okay physically as best we can.
Mhm.
Um, and then you hear a lot of people talk about people who have transitioned and then regret it. And
Mhm.
that makes me really, really concerned about children that, and this is again, me just giving you my opinion, and let's let them be kids for a while and develop on and see where that kind of goes
But I
to
think the hard part is as a parent, if your kid is telling you, I feel like something's wrong with me, you know, physically I'm a girl, but mentally I feel like a boy, how do you show support and care and love for them while also saying,
give it a minute.
mm-mm, you
Yeah,
know,
give it a
and
minute. And
yeah,
let's see where this goes because,
but your kid is
last year
depressed.
you wanted to be a firefighter and then
Yeah.
then an astronaut. Now this. So you got to let kids kind of
But if your kid is
negotiate that.
wholeheartedly saying that this is who I am and who I want to be, and then as an adult, you're saying, well, hold up now. No, you
Hmm.
can't, it can't be. That's where we kind of start to see the disconnect between the parent and the child. You know, the
Yeah.
kid starts to resent the parent because you don't understand me. You're not trying to understand me. You're trying to shut me down. When really the parent's not trying to shut you down. They're just trying to get you to wait. And kids aren't really good at
No,
waiting.
they're
Right.
not. Yeah.
And so that's kind of where that disconnect comes from.
For me, my daughter just turned 18, and then there's been some talk of tattoo. And
Hmm.
even at 18, I'm like, hey, you gotta understand that's. And I'm not against tattoos by no
My
means.
daughter just did the same thing.
Yeah. And I'm like, just be careful. Even with my wife, sometimes she goes to get a new tattoo, and I'm like, really think about this, okay? Because this is here forever, and you get and sometimes our emotions get in. I'm going to put this on, and I try to always think through a tattoo really carefully
Hmm.
because it's forever. And so when my 18-year-old daughter, I'm still hesitant because I know this is going to be with her forever. I think that kind of applies. I mean, it's not maybe an appropriate comparison, but yeah, it's something's forever. Let's think through. Be careful with this. This is you can't go back. Especially
Hmm.
in that situation. There's no going back. And I know there's a lot of medical issues too that they have to deal with later in life. I'm not going to discount it at all because, like I said, there are certain situations where I've seen people that were gay that I'm like, yeah, that's how it must be because I'm not going to choose that as a straight heterosexual. So yeah, lots of issues there, and then you go into the politics. I know we're not going to necessarily get into the politics of that, but we see that change in politics. We just seen the administration change and a completely flip flop
Hmm.
on how the government decides to deal with that.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is I think that we need less government. I think we need to be, not as involved. I think there are some issues there, though. I think some of the issues are with military, things that we provide health care for, of course, the bathroom issue,
Hmm.
some of those things. So those are all some really tricky subjects to get into. Maybe that'll be tomorrow. I got a politician coming in tomorrow. I'll hammer down
Yeah.
on
Save
him.
that for them.
I'll hammer down on that. Yeah, those are you can get into a lot of mess. People really have strong feelings about some things, and some things they have strong feelings on. There's nothing have anything to do with them,
Hmm.
But children as a whole, I think parents need to be the guiding point in a child's life. We shouldn't just intercede because we disagree, but children in a whole, as a nation, as a world, are all of our concern. You know what I mean? Because they don't have you come at me, I'm gonna come back. But those sometimes children can't do that.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of children in your practice?
Hmm.
Lots of
One
them.
third of my clientele is children.
One third. And I guess what are you seeing the top things that they're struggling with?
Mm, ADHD, anxiety, depression, and emotion regulation.
Yeah. The ADHD being the first one you said, well, of course, Joe Rogan, he watches our show a lot. So shout out to him. But he often talks about having ADHD as a child
Hmm.
and how, he knew right away that an office setting, going in and tradition, he couldn't do it. It wasn't for him. And
Yeah.
my personal opinion on the current education system, and I need to get someone in here. I've been looking at maybe getting some teachers and professors to come down because I'd like to talk to them about that But without the having that sounding board, my personal opinion on the current education system in this world was set up by billionaire billionaires in the 40s and 20s that wanted to build and create employees. Show up on time, sit down, do what you're supposed to do, go to lunch, finish what you got done, and go home. And then maybe in 30 years you get a bass boat, and you can retire.
Right.
And that doesn't that's a cookie cutter mode. And as we've talked about, people aren't that.
Mhm.
I struggled in school with that. I could take notes in history class without listening, without writing them down. So I would be doing other things, being a class clown, and then they would try to call me out on it, and I have the answer. But just sitting there was not for me. And
Mhm.
I often wonder about college as well. This is something that a lot of uh, very intelligent people out there is like, college is starting to not be necessarily necessary because you go to college and you learn, you know, 15 things over here that's not really what your interest is. And whereas you could be spending all your time learning that particular interest. Whoa, boy, I got a really off point there. Um, so with the ADHD, do you see that as something we can regulate without medication? And I know a lot of it is just like hyperactivity,
Mhm.
correct? They can't sit still. Their teachers are having issues.
A lot of it is they just don't know like executive functioning skills. So, you know, if I struggle with attention, I have to eliminate distractions, right? If I struggle to focus, then I may set a timer that, okay, I have to focus for 5 minutes, but then when the timer goes off, I can go walk some laps and get the energy out and then come back. And maybe now I'm going to sit for 15 minutes, right? Then I'm going to take another break. I'm going to go walk. I'm going to go get some energy out, do what I need to do. Then I'm going to come back, right? I think we don't allow ourselves to take breaks and we feel like we have to just sit. We don't eliminate distractions. We don't use planners anymore because everything's on our phone. We're not, well, there's all kinds of tools and tricks out there to help us focus and help us improve our ADHD. So
Um, Talking about that then, so do you think maybe we need to revise some things in the school system to maybe help that?
I
Yeah.
think because we fixate on everybody sitting at a desk and paying attention, we're starting to lose our creativity. Um, Kids aren't allowed to be as creative as they once were, and I think that's a problem.
So
Between
another thing too, we talked about diet and mental health, and I think in today's world, it's so hard to eat correctly
mhm,
when you don't have the finances to do that.
mhm,
Even I recently went to a local store who um, their meat selection is not going to be, prime is good for the local store. And they had ribeye for like $21 a pound. Uncooked ribeye steak for like $31, and that's a lot for especially families that now I know of course ribeye is a better cut, but we are all seeing an increase in the pricing on food. And it makes it really tough for kids and the diets that they have. Now we have, I know I'm really trying to stay away from the politics, but we have a new health person in Congress or in the new Robert Kennedy Jr. I've been a big fan of his for a while, and I know some of his things are controversial, but he's been doing away with some of the things that he deems an issue for everyone, of course, but primarily kids. Do you think diet change could help a lot too? I'm assuming, right?
talk a lot about red dyes because it's in everything.
Hmm.
But we do see, and studies have shown that red dye increases irritability, hyperactivity,
Like,
aggression in kids and that kind of thing. And I have seen that parents who have started to curb sugars and red dyes, they're seeing better behavior in their kids
yeah,
and better sleep too, right? If you're giving a kid the nutrients that they need, they're going to sleep better. They're going to feel better. Their moods are going to be better.
yeah. Well, actually, you talking about that was something next too was that they're also looking at changing the times on school.
Mhm.
so that they start later because they're saying children aren't getting enough sleep. I know that I can't remember, but it seems like teenagers need X amount and adults and then kids, but some of those numbers are in the 10 hours, you know, uh, for
I'm
kids.
curious to see how well that'll go though, because I mean, a lot of that goes back to that structure, that executive functioning. Are parents able to set strict bedtimes for their kids and make sure that they're not on electronics all night, right?
Mhm.
If I have a teen that stays up till 4 o'clock in the morning playing video games and then school's at 7, are they going to be able to get up? No. Even if I push the time back till 10 a.m., are they going to really be up and functioning? No.
Mhm.
It's about that ability to maintain structure and consistency.
So when you're talking to a parent and you're
Mhm.
saying, okay, we got these issues and I can see some maybe potential diet issues, how do you counsel them with
I don't look at it as
foods?
counseling. It's psychoeducation. I'm
Yeah,
I'm providing them with education to improve their child's life and hopefully theirs because if their kid is eating better and less irritable, that's a win for the parent. If the
sure.
kid is sleeping better, guess what? That's a win for the parent, right? And so I don't look at it as counseling the parent. Parenting's hard enough, but I am going to provide them with
Yeah.
psychoeducation. Here's some things that has been tried and true. Other parents have tried it. I've tried it with my kids. You can try it if you want to. And I always like to lead with that. Hey, here's some information that I think would be beneficial. It's worth trying. But I don't ever come out and just be like, do this or do that.
Right, right. Well, when I was saying counsel would be give counsel, like say these are like what you're saying.
Hmm.
These are things that might help. Um, but then I'm sure you get feedback with, well, I can't do that. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources to buy these foods. Making it even more difficult for them to deal with.
Well, so if it comes to like eating, because that's really hard. Like even me, I have 6 children. It's hard to just go to the grocery store and pick out all the things that don't have red dye or this, that, and the other.
Yeah, the
Um,
sugars and processed foods,
but
and
yeah, so
I mean the
there's,
list is long. What
mm-hmm,
you got to stay away from, and those are all primarily the things that you can get
yeah.
cheaper.
But there's an app, and I forgot, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head right now. But you scan it at the grocery store, and it'll automatically tell you if it's good or, if it qualifies as no red dyes in certain um like requirements that you
Mhm.
want for your healthy food for your kid. So I share things like that. I'm like, hey, here's this app you can use to help you at the grocery store make better food options. Hey, do you want help? I can create with the client. Me and your child can create a schedule or chore chart or whatever together. Are you okay with that? And so, I mean, we do stuff like that as well.
I hear a lot too that you should try to stay away from the center of a grocery store and try to focus on the outer perimeters where you have produce and fresh meats. But that's hard for a family who
I
may
don't
be
do that.
working multiple jobs, right? I mean, because those are all perishable goods on those outer
Hmm.
edges. And so you have to be able to cook them, prepare them, get them out, not let them go bad. Yeah.
Hmm.
We need to take a look at that as a country. Yes, Tristan. Thank you. All right. Are you good? You okay?
Yeah,
I
I'm
know.
good.
Yeah, we'll finish up here. But I like to there's so many things,
No, you're
you
good.
know.
Go ahead.
I think that's something we gotta look at is ways to provide food for people that's going to be less expensive, easier to prepare. That may be a great opportunity for a corporation to maybe look at as developing something that can be nutritious without being complex to prepare.
I think education is important though, because, I think back to food and excuse me, food and nutrition class in high school. And yeah, it taught us how to make basic things like eggs or cookies and like things like that. But really, most people don't really know anything about nutrition.
That's a very good point.
So yeah, I can go to I know what fruits and vegetables are, but I don't know how to prepare these vegetables,
Yeah,
right? Where they actually taste decent. I don't even know what's in Brussels sprouts that makes it good for you. Like
right.
what I don't
Yeah,
know. But I know orange juice gives you vitamin C. That's
yeah,
it. But I really think a big part of it is we don't know enough to be able to go in the store and make educated purchases.
yeah.
So even if I had the funds, I wouldn't even know where to start, and I think that's what we see a lot with people.
Yeah, I going back to that education thing, I think that it goes to similar that we're creating employees. We're not teaching people how to have a life, because not only there, you'll see in finances that's not really taught personal finance on how to do things. I
Mhm,
know lots of new people out of school that don't know what a check register is. So you take that same thing, and there's an option for you to do a home ec class. But in that home ec class, what do you learn how to do? You learn how to sew a pillow, or maybe some food prep, but not really, instead of saying, okay, instead of saying everybody needs to know physiology, which isn't the case. I mean,
mhm,
honestly, not everyone's going to get that. Everyone needs to know how to cook for themselves and provide for themselves. I think that's something we really need to step back at and look and quit trying to build these employees that's going to sit behind the desk, and albeit I need employees, but we need to go back and say, okay, this is what you're going to need to survive. This is how you should live. And that's a very good point about teaching people how to do that in school, because then those kids can go home and say, hey mom, look what I did, or hey dad, look at what we did, and this
mhm.
is an easier way to provide something better, and it maybe will even create some good habits.
Mhm.
Hey, I'm not preaching here by no means. I did eat a bowl of ramen and 3 bowls of Cocoa Pebbles last night, so
Mhm.
I'm horrible, but I tried to be better. We all have our problems. So we got into a lot of things. With the kids, though, you have your anxieties, and that seems to be enormous problem. Uh, Children dealing with that. So often I've seen that in my daughter's friends, and it really causes some social anxieties and how they can be reenacted. It makes it, they're being judged about being lazy and not being go getters, but a lot of these things are just these anxieties hold them back.
Mhm.
Is that something? Yeah, I'm sure you're seeing a lot of that. How do you feel about that? And is there some things that can help?
A lot of it I see is overstimulation. You put a kid on a school bus and there's 50 other kids all talking and it's loud and you hear the bus and you hear the bus driver and you hear people honking their horns. And so, yeah, I have anxiety because there's a lot going on, right? And then you put them in a classroom with 30 other kids. Half of them are asleep, half of them are actually paying attention, but maybe tapping their leg, tapping their pencil. And then the teacher's talking, you hear everything, right? And then you also have school shootings, you have
Yeah,
severe weather, you have all these other things that add into that anxiety. On top of that, the kid might have things going on at home that are also causing
most
them
likely.
anxiety,
Yeah,
right? And so we see a level of anxiety in kids, but it's understandable.
yeah, and you're seeing fear-based media. They're
Mhm.
making everything seem so um they're just focusing on a small group of people who maybe are in leadership positions or whatever, but the majority of the world, the
Mhm.
majority of the people in this country are just trying to get by. We're working,
Mhm.
we're living our normal lives, and it's not as hopefully it's not as catastrophe as
Mhm.
what they are led to believe. So yeah, in their young minds, and they're going out there going, I've got all this I have to accomplish, and tomorrow the world's gonna overheat, or
I'm gonna do all this work
we
and then
got
it's gonna be over.
yeah, there's gonna be World War III, and there's gonna be a civil war. All these things are being pushed, and really, I can see the anxieties there, and I don't know really what the answer is though. I mean, how do we? I mean, the how do you get by the school bus ride to school, and the TikTok where you're seeing countries getting ready to attack, and what can we do? I
If
mean, I
it's if
personally have my
it's
own anxieties, not necessarily the
If we're
same for
having
you.
anxiety due to overstimulation, then, they have these noise canceling earbuds where you can hear, but it reduces the sound that comes in so that it is less overwhelming. And I see a lot of clients that do really well with those, especially kids. But meditation, medication, um, deep breathing exercises, reframing our thoughts, like those are a lot of things. Because anxiety usually comes from negativity in our head. We're thinking the worst possible scenario that's going to happen. Oh, this tornado, it's the end. This is the end, right? And so it's based in negativity and fear. How can we reframe this? How can we change? Do you know what reframing is?
Yeah, I kinda
You're
understand
taking a negative thought and you're trying to find
a
it and turn it
positive
into.
spin,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a really big thing when it comes to anxiety is how can I mentally respin these things? So if we're thinking something negative, let's come up with two positive,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
I tend to run things over and over and over, and I know
mhm.
getting new results,
Mhm.
but I can't quit that
Yeah.
cycle. You said something about noise canceling earbuds, and this is, something that I have an issue with a little bit of overstimulation. Like there's too many things going on at one
Mhm.
time. My mind is trying to focus on all of them. So it makes it really hard and it can get overwhelming. And then maybe lash out.
Mhm.
And the problem is the one person I lash out to is maybe just a simple thing they're
Mhm.
trying to tell me. But however, I'm trying to get all this other stuff. Theo Vaughn, who's a podcaster and comedian, he watches our show a lot.
Mhm.
And so here, Theo, the shout out to you. He was talking about he recently started wearing ear muffs, like
Mhm.
sound control, completely blocking. He says it's the best thing that ever happened to him.
Well, for kids who are like in school or in environments where they can't necessarily have those big earmuffs on, I
Yeah,
like these earbuds that I'm talking about, they specifically go in your ear and you really don't even see them.
yeah.
Like you don't really see them at all. And it's not blocking out all of the sound, it's just getting rid of the excess sound. So it helps keep you from getting overstimulated and things like that.
Seen some severe cases of maybe autism where children are out in public and they have to wear something to
Mhm.
completely block it off. And I've seen them been judged by that by an older group. And I think that maybe this older group either I have to think that it's becoming more prominent and maybe more
Mhm.
severe with time, with whatever's in our environment or something's changing. And I think that maybe we had it and maybe the generation before me had it, but not and as severe. And of course they would just dismiss. But for me, I'm like, I kind of get it. I mean, this kid over here is struggling and maybe they're at a church or at a whatever, some kind of family get together and to judge them for that I guess because too, my daughter struggled not to that degree, but she struggles with interaction, and sometimes she gets judged for it. She loves to be around it until it fatigues her,
Mhm.
but she has issues trying to. I will watch her and she'll be shaking, and there'll be a conversation come up, and she'll perk up, and she's got something she wants to say, and she's trying to get it before the conversation changes.
Mhm.
I love that about her, but it can be overwhelming, and for those really suffering with severe symptoms. I hate that people judge those kids
Mhm.
because at least they're out of the house. I will tell you this: those older generations stuck those kids in a room somewhere or in a hospital somewhere, and they didn't let that was it.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of courage for a young kid like that to do that. I was recently at a store down here, and I could tell, and you can tell, there was some issues with this kid, and it was a young 12-year-old girl, and she had cowboy boots on, and she had this, and I could tell that she struggled severely. And her dad says she doesn't. And later I found out her dad said, well, she never talks. I said, and here I am, I maybe seem to that kid probably little scary, maybe a little confrontational. And I looked at her and I caught her eye. I said, I like those boots. And she just, boom, come out of that shell,
Mhm.
and she was trying to kind of communicate with me. So, yeah, I think judging people in any case tends to be a negative thing.
Mhm.
We've done it for years on everything out there. It seems like, man, just give it a break, dude. If you don't like it, don't just
Right.
get away from it, right?
Mhm.
All right. So I've kept you a long time, and I know you got other things probably to do. So kind of starting to wrap things up. I'm not going to give you the podcast questions because we did that. I think I'm going to refrain from that because I got a really tough one. Got an answer I wasn't prepared for the other day. So but how's life for you? Everything is going good, and
Yeah.
I know you enjoy what you do.
Mhm.
I talked to a friend of mine, and I think you might know him, Danny Stoner, maybe not. I don't know. He was a fighter of mine years ago.
I don't think so.
He came in for one of our fight pod or pod fight sessions, and he got out of control. It's a lot of fun. Everybody having a good time. But Danny's that guy who's just very charismatic. Everybody loves him. He always wanted to be a professional wrestler,
Mhm.
and he got in MMA, and he's just very unconventional. Love the guy, and he was telling me, and I got almost jealous to a point where I almost got angry. He's like, man, he's like, dude, I don't work. He says because he owns a barber shop with a friend in Marion, Kentucky.
Mm,
I mean, when you go to Marion, it's like stepping back in time, you
yeah.
know. And he says, I have I go there, kids come in, they get a haircut, I fly them over to the bar, and then he says, I never work, I enjoy it. It's every day
Mhm.
is fun for me. And I'm like, ooh, you got it,
It's like I need
you
that.
got what I want, and
Yeah,
it's so bad. And I know you love what you do.
I do.
Yeah, you
Mm,
feel fulfilled though, right?
I
Like when you're
do.
done, you're like, I really maybe did something here. Yeah.
Mhm.
Have you ever had a disappointment though? Something that really just went, it's like, man, I didn't reach it. You know, like I said earlier, I have had a few things in my life that I never seen it coming. I'm like, oh, why? What? You know, they didn't reach out to me. There's
Yeah.
people in my life that I'll just let it slip by.
I think for me professionally, it is the things that I do see coming, but I know I can't do anything about. When you've exhausted all of the resources and you see the client who's coming in and they've tried everything that they can to help their situation and you're stuck and you know that it's only a matter of time before um it all falls apart
Yeah,
for that client and there's nothing that you can do about it.
yeah,
And that's the hardest part about,
that's a tough one.
yeah.
So, not to get into your personal, but like finances,
Mhm.
but is this something if somebody's out there and they're like, "You know what? I'd really like to do this." I
Mhm.
want somebody I want everybody to be like Danny. I want
Mhm.
everyone to go, "I love what I do, man." If somebody's looking to do something like what you're talking about, is it financially? I mean, is it rewarding,
Um,
comparable?
a lot of people would tell you no,
Yeah.
that you cannot get into this field for the money. Um, and part of the reason why is because one, it is draining and there's no amount of money that you can throw on to exhaustion, mental exhaustion.
Yeah.
But also, this field, most jobs, especially if you're in private practice, they don't offer health insurance. So that's a big factor for a lot of people. Cancellations are a big thing because we're paid by the service that we provide. People cancel, people don't show up, people sometimes are unreliable. So if I schedule 10 people today and five of them decide to call in, then
Yeah. You just
I
lost half your
oh,
wage.
so it can be unpredictable. And that's just kind of the nature of this profession. And so for a lot
Yeah.
of people, that's a deal breaker.
I know for me, like if you go to the doctor and you cancel, they charge you. If you're not canceling within a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
But
And we do. Some of us have cancellation policies and things like that. But also, this is the field where we tend to give a lot of grace because people are coming to us sometimes in their darkest and hardest moments.
struggling, and it's
Yeah.
hard. It's
Hmm.
hard to maybe do. Yeah, I could see it being like, I need help, and
Hmm.
then the day comes, it's like I can't do this. I
And then
just
there's insurance requirements and things that we have to also meet that expectation for. I know Medicaid doesn't allow you to charge a cancellation fee.
hmm
So,
yeah,
and a large part of the clientele that I have Medicaid, right?
yeah.
So if they don't show up, then I don't get paid. So,
So do your friendships, do you
mhm.
find a lot of your friendships with coworkers, or is it more people outside of work?
I have a group of therapists that I have worked with professionally that we go for walks and we kind of toss around different ideas and therapeutic approaches and that kind of thing with. So, yeah.
So a person in today's world,
Mhm.
and it could be anywhere from, just trying to negotiate life. Do you have like a couple things you could say, try this to take away some of the stress? And here I'm getting free advice. Just saying. You did get a donut out of this, but
It was a good
people,
donut.
so people who are really struggling, just with day to day life and the stresses. I think the other day I actually with Brad Henson, he was here telling me about transitioning from a 1,000 member church where he had multiple campuses. And his wife was like, "Okay, do you realize you've not had breakfast, lunch, or dinner with us in 3 weeks? Your
Mm,
family." And then he's like, "Oh man, I need and hey, I get to that point myself sometimes when I'm like, oh, I gotta take a move. Do you have any kind of just a few little quick things that could help people deal with those stresses and anxieties of
mhm.
just normal life in this world?
Mm. One thing I'll say is learn your attachment style. If you don't know your attachment style, you need to learn it.
And the
Uh,
attachment style would be
so there are 4 attachment styles, but they're on a spectrum.
uh
So just like autism is on a spectrum, so is attachment styles. You have secure attachment, you have an anxious attachment, you have avoidant attachment, and then you also have a disorganized attachment.
Okay.
And I
Tristan, make sure we get those popped up there. I want people to see that.
and I everybody has an attachment style based on how they were raised or how they were if you grew up in a home where you had 2 secure parents who communicated well, um, and had good self-esteem and that kind of thing, then you grew up in a home where you felt comfortable having your voice heard, then you grew up in a secure attached home. When we talk about anxious attachment, those are typically our people pleasers, people who view other people highly, but they usually have low self esteem with themselves. And then you have the avoidant attachment. And part of that people pleasing too is the emotional. They're very emotional based, right? That avoidant attachment, they shut down. They don't want to communicate. They don't like emotions. It makes them uncomfortable. Um, these are typically people who are in very independent or leadership roles. They think highly of themselves, but they don't tend to think highly of others, which is the complete opposite of the anxious attached, who have low self esteem, but they think highly of everyone else. And it's funny because the anxious and the avoidant, they're drawn to each other,
Yeah.
and then they're very toxic as well. And then the fourth one is the disorganized. Disorganized is when you're a combination between the avoidant and the anxious. And typically, what we see is people who are disorganized. They maybe had a dad who was very avoidant, who didn't talk about his emotions, didn't talk about his feelings, kept everything inside, didn't really communicate very well. But then you had mom, who's very anxiously attached, who is a people pleaser. And so, what is that kid? He's disorganized. He's a combination of both. One minute he's shutting down, the next minute he's overly explaining. It's like a tug of war with yourself type. But attachment styles impact how you view the world. It impacts how you form friendships. It impacts relationships, how you raise your children. And a lot of people don't know anything about it. And so
Yeah.
they repeat the cycle. And so learn about your attachment style.
I would say be truthful to yourself about that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And when you learn about your attachment style, if you realize, "Oh, I'm a very anxious person and I people please and I don't set boundaries and maintain those boundaries," then you know that this is something that you need to work on,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's a big thing that I tell people. Other thing is chaos. A lot of us, we create our own chaos. We
Yeah.
create our own dysfunction, which leads to our anxiety and our depression. So eliminate the things that are causing you chaos,
Yeah.
right? If it's you're not establishing and maintaining boundaries, set boundaries with people. If your problem is that you are constantly going in and gossiping and joining in on the drama, like, why are we doing that? What need is unmet in us that we have to go create chaos or seek out,
Right.
you know? I don't know, I could go on all day about
I'm
that
sure you
though.
could. Yeah. And I appreciate you because you're coming in here doing this, and this you can tell when someone loves what they do because it's not just all about, "Oh, wait. Talk to my receptionist, she'll get you an appointment."
Mhm.
So you're doing this, giving advice for
Mhm.
absolutely free. No, you're paying to do this because you drive down here and you're spending your time with me. So that's an amazing thing that you're doing, and I really appreciate it. But people do sometimes need to reach out for therapy,
Mhm.
and I encourage people to do that. It's a new world we live in, and it's a hard world. It's a lot harder now than it was in the '80s. I will
Mhm.
say some people maybe struggled more than others, with things that aren't as big a deal now, but it was a lot easier for the general public, to negotiate. Today's world with the politics the way it is and so many different things going on and so much diversity and when I say diversity, I guess and that's not what the word I wanted to use, so much division.
Mhm.
They're just like, "This is right, this is wrong," and everybody seems to think the different things there. But it is, yeah, so I encourage people to do that. Real quickly, one final thing that I wanted to ask you about, what about these, 'cause sometimes therapy is expensive,
Mhm.
it's hard to do, and it takes a lot of time. Not only you have to go there and, what about these, like, online therapies or apps you can do? Are those helpful, or should we avoid those? I don't know.
Are you talking about
Like a better health or something like that. I don't
Gotcha.
even know if that's the right word for it, but and I don't wanna really,
I always tell
one
people It's different for everybody and what they need, right? If you can't afford to go see a therapist in office and pay the copay or your insurance is not covered, some
Or
help is better than no help, right?
yeah.
So if the only thing you can afford is
Well, and also time is
yeah,
so
right?
hard, yeah.
If the only thing that's getting you
I
through
will
right
say
now
Mhm.
specifically BetterHelp has been called out for doing a lot of bad practices and a
yeah,
lot of, like,
Well,
scams and
yeah, and I
stuff.
yeah,
don't necessarily wanna get involved into too much of that with those things, but yeah, I mean, there's
yeah.
opportunities there, and it's easy to get scammed when you're not face to
I
face with
was
someone.
mainly talking about like people are using AI now. People
Mhm.
are using chat, all kinds of
Sure, yeah.
resources out there. And if you can't afford to see a therapist and that's all you got, then
Maybe you'll get a little bit of,
if you can learn something
yeah,
from one of those tools, then by all means do that. But if you have the resources to actually see a therapist, do that.
yeah, yeah. That's another thing I find envious, that I'm envying me is that people have time, people have time.
Mhm.
You'll see these very wealthy people and they're like, "Well, we're gonna take a month."
People make time for the things that are important for
I
them,
know.
though. And I always tell
Well,
people your mental health should be
it is, it
that
is.
priority.
Yeah, I know I'm envious of it, but hey, I did it. I did
Yeah.
it right here. 2 hours of
Yeah.
a free session with my friends. So, you're awesome again. I don't know why you come down here and spend this time with me for so
You make
little.
it easy, Joe.
You're fun and people love you. And I think you still hold the record right now for the most viewed shorts that we've had. You've got like several thousand.
Oh,
So
goodness.
guess because you're just so pretty that everybody wants to see what's up with this person, but and most everybody else. But you do hold the record right now. So yeah, that's awesome. And I love having you in. People need this information and are interested in it. And I can't even think of anybody that could tell better. I mean, you've done really well, and I appreciate the tips here with the earbuds that you were talking about. That's something I've never heard of, and then these four things that we can start looking at in ourselves and how to handle people that might be suicidal. I know people out there that these are questions that they deal with on a daily basis, and maybe some of the things you've talked about with us as far as school and children and helping those kids out. It's a hard world for a guy my age, and these little guys coming up in it, man. We
Yeah.
gotta we gotta have their back. As
Mhm.
a society, we gotta have our children's back and help them get through that. So again, thanks so much, man, for coming
Absolutely.
down, taking time to hang out with us, and I hope you get to see some family and friends while you're down here, and look forward to maybe doing it again one of these days. We'll
Absolutely.
down the road. I'll get some more questions for you. So, all right, so we'll call it that, and thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
You're welcome. See ya.
Awesome. Bye bye.
Bye.
What exactly happened down there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I talked to him and blah, blah, blah. He asked about you guys and da 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 da. More questions, blah, blah, blah.